What happens when our own reason betrays us? Today, we're going to dive into that very question through the pretty incredible story of a brilliant expert whose logic didn't just fool him, it ended up leading an entire nation astray.
Everything kicks off right here, with this simple paradox. How could one of the most brilliant criminal minds of his time get so completely taken down by a single piece of paper? The answer, it turns out, reveals a really dangerous flaw, not just in his thinking, but in all of our minds.
Okay, let's set the scene. Our main character is a guy named Alphonse Bertillon, a super celebrated French criminologist. And the piece of paper? It's an anonymous, handwritten note, they called it the bordereau, that proves a spy is leaking military secrets to the Germans, and Bertillon has just been asked to find the traitor.
But here's the thing. The investigation was basically framed from the get-go. Bertillon wasn't just handed the note and told, hey, find a match. Nope. His superiors, these two lieutenant colonels, Henry and Dupaty de Clam, they told him they already had a suspect, a Captain Alfred Dreyfus. And this is the crucial part. They had no other evidence, at all. But Bertillon didn't know that. And, influenced by the anti-Semitism of the time, he just accepted the premise. Dreyfus was guilty. His job, as he saw it, was just to prove it.
So, Bertillon's mind goes to work with this one single purpose, proving Dreyfus wrote that note. The problem was, the evidence just wouldn't cooperate. So he was forced to come up with one of the most bizarre theories in the history of legal cases.
So here's the puzzle Bertillon was facing. He compares the spy's note to a sample of Dreyfus's handwriting, and it's not a match. Sure, there's some similarities, but there are also really clear differences. So many, in fact, that other experts concluded they were written by two totally different people. So if you've already decided Dreyfus is guilty, how on earth do you explain this?
Well, first, he reasons that a smart spy like Dreyfus would be way too clever to write a damning note in his own actual handwriting. So he must have disguised his writing. Okay, that conveniently explains the differences. But wait, that creates a new problem. Why are there still similarities? Why didn't he just use a completely different style? And this, right here, is what leads to Bertillon's masterpiece of flawed reasoning, the theory of auto-forgery. He concludes Dreyfus intentionally imitated his own handwriting, but with just a few small changes. And the goal? If he ever got caught, he could point to the similarities and claim he was being framed by a forger who was trying to copy his writing. It was a perfect, inescapable trap.
A Chicago lawyer at the time, Frank Blair, summed up the absolute absurdity of the argument perfectly. With this kind of logic, Bertillon created a perfect catch-22. If the writing looked like Dreyfus's, he was guilty. And if it didn't look like his writing, well, that was just even more proof of his cunning guilt. There was no way out.
And the result of this so-called evidence? Dreyfus was arrested, tried, and sentenced to life deportation on this tiny island, miles and miles from France. Bertillon's reasoning, no matter how flawed, had done its job.
But the story does not end there. Not even close. Because what happened next is what truly reveals the dark side of reasoning. A dark side that, believe it or not, exists in all of us. So a year later, the new head of military intelligence finds conclusive proof of the real spy, an officer named Ferdinand Esterhazy, whose handwriting is a perfect match for the bordereau. Okay, this should have been the end of it, right? Case closed. But when they present this new evidence to Bertillon, he's unswayed one bit. His mind just cooks up a new reason to fit his belief. He claims the Jews have been training someone for a year to imitate the writing. A few years later, at a new trial in 1899, he doubles down, delivering a 10-hour deposition, filled with even more complex and frankly bizarre theories. And get this, Dreyfus is found guilty again, before finally being pardoned and years later fully rehabilitated. Now, it's really easy to just dismiss Bertillon as a madman, but that completely misses the point. His thinking wasn't unique. It was actually an extreme example of mental processes that scientists have replicated in labs over and over again. His case is a perfect window into three powerful biases that affect how every single one of us reasons.
The first one is overconfidence, when Bertillon claimed his system embraced all the facts with perfect comprehensiveness. He was a textbook case. Experiments show that when you ask people to give reasons for their beliefs, they almost always look for reasons that support their initial hunch. They don't spontaneously look for reasons why they might be wrong. And this one-sided search for evidence naturally makes them more and more confident, whether they're actually right or not.
The second bias is belief polarization.
You probably noticed how Bertilion's belief didn't just stay the same, it got more and more extreme over 15 years. Dreyfus became more cunning, the conspiracy grew wider. This happens because, as we think about an issue, we tend to just pile up reasons that support our initial take. This process doesn't lead to moderation, it pushes us further and further out on a limb, making our beliefs more extreme.
And finally, there's belief perseverance. Bertillon's initial evidence was that supposed handwriting match. When that was completely discredited by finding the real author, he should have changed his mind, but he didn't. So why not? Because in the meantime, he had built an entire scaffold of other reasons. And once that scaffold is up, the belief can stand all on its own. Even if you knock out the original foundation, it's a really powerful and stubborn feature of our minds.
So Bertillon shows us how a lone reasoner can end up, well, completely off the rails. But what happens when you get a whole group of people reasoning in the exact same way? The effects aren't just replicated, they're amplified.
Just look at this comparison. A single person accumulates reasons, they lack self-criticism, and they become overconfident. Well, a group of like-minded people does the exact same thing, but they feed off each other. They provide each other with new reasons, they fail to criticize each other's ideas, and the result is what's known as group polarization. The entire group becomes more confident and moves to a much more extreme position. And you can see the results of this everywhere. It's the engine that drives conspiracy theories, where people online find kindred spirits and simple doubts escalate into full-blown paranoia. It's also behind what the psychologist Irving Janis called groupthink, this failure of a group to challenge itself that led to disasters like the Bay of Pigs invasion. The core principle is group polarization. You put a bunch of people who already agree in a room to talk, and they will come out with stronger, more extreme beliefs than they started with. All of this, the overconfidence, the polarization, the groupthink, it paints a pretty bleak picture of human reason. It seems, well, broken. But what if it's not broken at all? What if we've just completely misunderstood its real purpose?
Okay, so there are two ways to look at this. The traditional or intellectualist view says that reason evolved to help individuals find truth, but this view can't really explain why it so often leads us to these biases. The interactionist approach offers a totally different answer. It says reason's goal isn't solitary truth-seeking. Its purpose is social. It evolved to help us argue our case, persuade others, and justify our actions to our group. And from this perspective, the biases we've been seeing aren't flaws, they're features. Reason is doing exactly what it's designed to do, find arguments for our side. The problem is the context we use it in.
And here's the crucial point. Reasoning is designed for a very specific environment. Its normal condition is social and dialogic. It's meant for the back and forth of a debate, where our biased arguments are constantly tested against someone else's biased arguments.
This leads to a key question for us. If reason is a tool for dialogue, what's the problem in our modern world?
Our modern environment has basically become an abnormal one for reasoning. You see, the trigger for reasoning is usually a disagreement, or at least anticipating one. But today, we are constantly flooded with the opinions of people we will never actually meet or debate, editorialists, bloggers, commentators. So we find ourselves mentally preparing arguments for debates that are never going to happen, and this solitary reasoning, totally unchecked by any real dialogue, leaves us dangerously vulnerable to the exact same biases of overconfidence and polarization that completely took hold of Alphonse Bertillon.
The economist John Maynard Keynes really put it perfectly. The story of the expert who fooled himself isn't just some historical curiosity. It's a warning about the limits of our own minds and the profound danger of thinking too long and too hard all by ourselves.